comfortable. I just want to,
That's the problem.
So take a moment to get settled in your seat. Bring your mind here, not just your body. Really try to let go of thinking about the past or the future. Being aware of what's going on right now. Notice the feeling of the breath going in the body. And now allow yourself to think about how wonderful that is. That you're able to breathe. You probably all had a reason for coming this morning. So try to remember that reason and set an intention to use your time well. Let's now recite the four measurables on page 35 of the Gold Prayer Book. Well, 34 actually. I think I've got it and I don't. Okay. So may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So we recite these four every week because it's sort of the, the emphasis of how we want our minds to develop until we become enlightened. To really have this attention focused on the happiness of others, the relief of suffering for others. And then it requires equanimity to develop the mind that thinks of that all the time. Because right now we pretty much just think about it with our friends and loved ones, or the people we know and don't dislike. The people we dislike, we kind of occasionally even kind of smile if something goes wrong for them. Not terribly wrong, but like the flat tire or something. So good to see you, Raphael. So developing that mind, that as we put it Shantideva puts it, we want to equalize ourselves with others. We want to, right now, we have a habit of putting ourself first, whether that self is just literally me or everything that we consider to be mine, like my friends, my family, my loved ones. So we want to learn, and even, when the going gets tough, we'll even put ourselves above those folks if it when we feel it's necessary. So we want to try to recognize that everybody's the same, and that, actually our happiness really is interdependent with the happiness of others, that we're very interconnected, that, it's like we can't feel safe in the big city, without locks on our doors, because other people don't feel that they have enough. So, we need to recognize that it really is this, this attitude of wanting what we want, each of us, every single one of us in the whole planet, that is more important what everybody other than us wants, and that everybody's doing the same thing to lesser and greater degrees. And this causes all of us to feel like we have to guard each other. And of course, we think it starts with them, but it actually starts with us. It starts with our recognizing ourselves as a self, and then developing that, that thought other. So we want to work on that equanimity so that we really equalize ourselves with others and replace our self-centered habits with, the cherishing of others, so that we're, we're exchanging our usual habit of self-centeredness for cherishing others. And the Buddha said this will eventually lead us to lasting happiness. So, not the temporary kind we get from the temperature being just right. Now I'm cold. So last week we got into a discussion. Did it happen in class, Ingrid, about the desire and wanting? Okay, so it did start in class. Okay. Well, so, I felt like, okay, I'm not describing this well. I'm not explaining this well at all. And so I found something that His Holiness said about it. And that, he speaks a lot better than I do. He has a lot more wisdom than I have. So he was talking about that there's this new collection of books that Tuten Chodron, Venerable Chodron, has been editing for a long time. She's been working with His Holiness for decades, trying to come up with the teachings of the Lam Rim, which is the graduated path to enlightenment. But that includes the chapter for those of us who weren't raised in a culture that believed in past and future lives, that had just an acceptance of karma, all this kind of stuff, so it's like preschool. Because most of our texts start with this idea that, you're already convinced that, you have to work on your mind, you have to cherish others, that this is the path to happiness. And so for those of us who don't start with that as the original premise, we need a little help. So this series of books, and this particular one is the first volume, and it's called Approaching the Buddhist Path. So it's still not really a beginner book. But, it does describe some advanced things. So one of the things it talks about is this, that many, that, you know, one of the things it emphasizes in the chapter on mind is that, you know, our English words have been used to, you know, for the translation of the Sanskrit or the Tibetan words and the teachings, and that sometimes what we think of when we say these words is different than it did mean what it means in Buddhism, you know. So, you know, we have to be aware of that so we aren't misled by what we're reading and recognize there's, you know, particular definitions. And so one of those things is this idea of desire. So last week I was talking about how, I think it's Lama Yeshe, and probably the Buddha, said, you know, if you want to be happy, abandon all desire. Well, that tends to strike the heart of fear in most of us. You know, like, well, then what's the point? You know, like, how boring will that be? So, and of course, what it really is about is this word attachment. So attachment has a positive meaning in Western psychology, right? We need attachment for our parents and parents for our children and all that kind of stuff. So that's not what it means in Buddhism at all. So we need to be aware of that. Attachment in Buddhism is an excessive, exaggerated picture of something or someone. And in general, we talk about attachment being the positive side, like we're attached to our kids and our loved ones, you know. And that's not the same as love. That attachment is where we think, you know, our happiness depends on this thing, whether it's a thing like an iPhone or a person like your child, and that they, you know, how they are, you know, whether like the iPad works, or, you know, or it's been hacked, or, you know, or the child, you know, doesn't embarrass you in public or whatever, that those, you know, that additional stuff that goes around with our affection for these things is what is the distortion. Because our happiness or our suffering actually doesn't depend on the object. We all can see that with the iPhone, but it also doesn't depend on the child. The child can be a condition, you know, like if the child is very, very sick, that can be a condition for our concern and our worries and our, you know, all of that. It's when, but that our, this idea that we have that we will die if this other thing ceases, whether it's the phone or the child. Now, if that child dies, we may wish we would die, but it is not automatic, is it? So our peace of mind, finding our peace of mind after a tragedy is one of our big challenges, you know, because we don't die, you know, and life is never the same when we experience a profound loss. But we want to understand that the way we look at how we exist is often distorted by these thoughts of thinking, this must be in my life. You know, like divorce. You know, most of us when we get married, and I'm one of them, you know, at the beginning, you know, it's like, oh, you can't live without this person. And then if it doesn't go well, you sort of can't imagine continuing to live with this person, you know, and it's both of those states are distorted, you know. And if you do get divorced, it really is possible to be happy again without this person or without this relationship if the divorce isn't your choice, you know. And what do we How do we know that? I mean, what proof do we have of that?
Happens all the time.
Well, yeah, it happens to other, but those are other people.
Well, I've had very difficult things happen in my life, and I've survived it, and I'm happy.
And were you happy before the relationship? Or were you never happy before that relationship? So we have proof that even in that particular instance, having the relationship or not having the relationship, we already have proof that we are capable of happiness without the relationship, because we had it before. So when we lose it, you know, we can be happy again, because happiness is an inner state. It really isn't about what's happening outside of us in our relationships. It's not that all these relationships we have with things and people don't have an effect on our lives at all, or our minds at all. But the reality is that we can find peace of mind no matter what's going on, because peace of mind isn't a state of getting what you want and avoiding what you don't want, even though that's kind of how we think of it. It's just not true. But so this, you know, constant wanting to adjust the temperature, adjust the food, adjust the, I don't know, your schedule, adjust the amount of time you have, adjust the, you know, all the things you kind of if-onlys. All the if-onlys in your mind will not be, are not the issue with happiness and suffering. You know, whether you get your if-onlys fulfilled or not, you can have a peaceful state of mind. So desire.
I have a question. Can you have moments of grief and then moments of function? So you have moments, you're not stuck there, but you have, you're moving back and forth.
Grief doesn't even have to be a mind that is disturbs your peace of mind. This is one of the things we have to really become skilled at when we observe our mind, is being able to parse out the different things going on. You know, it's like, it's kind of easy to see with pain. You know, like say, a mosquito bites you. You know, assuming you're not pregnant and you're not, it's not a Zika mosquito. Say you're just, you know, and you're not of childbearing years and all these things we think about. But say you're just like me, you're old, you're not having any kids, and you know, and you get and you're not allergic to mosquito bites, and so mosquito bites means you have this temporary moment of pain, right? You know, I mean, that sensation, you know. But that, you know, so you may be aware of that pain, but whether or not we're disturbed by it is a different thing. So you can see that perhaps the reaction of someone like me who is not, I mean, I'm not living in a malaria-ridden country, you know, I'm not really in danger from the mosquito. But a woman who's trying to get pregnant, you know, has a different attitude towards mosquitoes. So the moment that person gets bit, because of her attachment to wanting to be healthy to bear a child, which is, you know, reasonable, you know, it might disturb her peace of mind. You know, so she'll have the pain of the mosquito bite, the noticing of that, plus the concern, the worry. So there'll be two types of suffering going on. Okay. So when we lose someone we love and we're grieving, you know, over time, that grief doesn't necessarily agitate the mind. It's more of just a recognition of loss. You know, we miss them, you know, but it doesn't agitate us to the point of it being a disturbing state of mind. Now, if we feed our grief, even if it's years later, I mean, I know this from my mother. My mother died a long time ago, like 35 years ago, you know, and there's still moments where, you know, I really miss her. Okay. And if I fed that and said, oh, it's terrible, you had to lose your mother so young, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, I can make it into a real agitating state of mind, you know. I've kind of gotten off track, but, as I do, sorry. But, so the idea is that just because a state of mind isn't pleasant doesn't mean it's necessarily agitating. We can make it agitating. It can be that, you know, but it's not, you know, now where we're headed is not even wanting that kind of disturbance, you know, but that's a long story. So, but this idea that, like regret, say you do something, you say something mean to somebody, because you're still a 2-year-old on a playground, no, a 7-year-old on a playground, you know. So you regret having said something to someone. That state of regret is a virtue. It's a positive state of mind. What's meant by virtue in Buddhism is that it leads you to happiness. It's, you know, it will result in a positive thing in the future. Doesn't mean it's, you know, not comfortable in that moment, but it's not agitating in the way that anger is, because anger is an incorrect state of mind. What did we say about anger or aversion? What's at the basis of that?
Ignorance.
Now, well, above that basis, the next basis.
Hurt. Hurt.
Now, I'm not saying what feeds it. The definition of anger is what?
Out of control.
No, that's not, it is out of control, but that's not the definition. Okay, the definition of love is what?
Kate.
Wow.
No.
I get that.
The desire for another's happiness.
The desire for others' happiness. Compassion?
The desire.
The desire that others are free of suffering.
Correct.
Okay, anger or aversion. Let's start with aversion. Yeah, this is, you know, have I just never said this? This is terrible.
Exaggeration.
It's an exaggerated state. What is it? What are we exaggerating?
The negative quality.
The negative qualities, to the point where we actually can't see the good qualities. So not only do we see something negative, and we may not even be accurate about what we're seeing as negative, we are focused only on that, and it grows. Attachment is the reverse of that. It's the exaggeration of what we see as positive. You know, to the point where it's a distorted, incorrect state of mind because it obscures us. You know, we all know this from that, you know, that teenage infatuation where the other person is perfect. Absolutely perfect. You know? So, but we do this in lesser degrees with all kinds of things that we like. Is we just focus on what we like about it, and then we exaggerate that, and then we tend to, you know, not notice anything else in that moment. And we often just flip back and forth. Those love-hate things, you know? So desire find exactly the quote I was looking for because I didn't do such a good job trying to explain this. So, okay, this is how His Holiness puts it. Just, you know, hope, desire, and acceptance have kind of two sides to them. So when we hope for good things for ourselves, a new house, a good job, a wonderful family, money, and material possessions, we become distracted from our spiritual concerns and entrenched in attachment. So this is like when we daydream about, you know, ooh, if I finally get that job and all the things we can do because of that job and that kind of thing. So Dharma texts that speak of abandoning all hopes are referring to these hopes concerning worldly gain that inevitably let us down. On the other hand, we must have hope for a better future so that we will work to create the causes for it. Here the future we hope for is not self-centered, one based on worldly desires, but one that takes others into consideration and wants happiness for many. This latter type of hope will motivate us to practice the Dharma and to engage in projects that directly benefit others. No matter what situation we are in, we should not lose hope. Losing hope and sinking into a defeatist attitude are the real causes of failure. They are also distorted mental states. We have human lives with our unique human intelligence, and these give us the capacity to overcome problems. Therefore, we should be calm and wisely investigate various alternatives rather than throwing up our hands in despair, which often makes the problem worse. So the negative aspect of desire is when its focus is worldly stuff. All the gains, you know, the 8 worldly concerns, you know, wanting to have gain, wanting fame, wanting praise, all those kinds of things. And most of us know this, you know, that becomes a distraction from what is important, even to us, that we know of, without any transformation of the mind at all, you know. At the end of your child's childhood, when you go, why did I work so hard and miss their entire childhood? You know, these are those moments where we kind of have some clarity that maybe what was important to us wasn't the gains we got from working so hard, you know, but, you know, that actually what's important to us is human interaction with our kids. You know? So this is why it's so important for us to spend time not being distracted by what we would call more spiritual values. So that when, at the end of the day, meaning the end of our lives, we're able to look back with more feelings of, you know, that you spent your life in a meaningful, fulfilling way than one that just, where you were just trying to get everything that you thought you wanted and needed for happiness. Because those kinds of gains generally don't work out that way. Because happiness, you know, really isn't outside of us. There are no things. Because, I mean, people can get everything material and not be happy. We see evidence of that. You know, we may not have as much experience with people who have nothing and who are happy. You know, but occasionally we meet people that strike us that way, and we're impressed. I'm impressed anyway. You know. But it's this, so we have to look at, you know, this is where we have to parse things out. So when we desire something, we really want to look and see what's under that desire. Is it because we want more of something? You know, so that we can kind of eliminate the mistaken ideas about the desire. You know, like our wisdom that knows that getting more of something does not equal happiness or fulfillment or meaningfulness. You know? And the things, our acquiring of stuff has, or not even just stuff, prestige. What are other things we acquire? Yeah, mostly we're stuff. Stuff and prestige, our reputation, So, and of course, good health and not wanting, physical pain, things like that. Where was I going with this? Oh, I really,
Doesn't make you happy.
Yeah, this aging brain doesn't make me happy either. So,
All the stuff does.
yeah, all this stuff doesn't make us happy.
We were talking about what His Holiness was referring to as somebody.
It's this, yes, and this, that we need to see that when we're just trying to meet the craving of, of our body and mind, the craving aspect, we're on the wrong track. That never leads to happiness. Craving itself is a suffering state of mind. Craving has this extra edge to it of somehow this thing we're craving, even if it's a person, but this object that we're craving somehow holds the answer for us in some way. We'll finally be happy then. If the laws would just, it can be an idea, if the laws would just change about this, if the people would just stop doing that, if we're grasping onto that and feel like our very, sanity depends on these things changing, it's not going to happen that way. You just keep feeding that craving. Say you get your own way and, and something changes, you'll just move on. Because you have that habit of thinking that, getting my craving met is what brings me happiness. Yeah.
So, is peace of mind just acceptance of whatever is going on?
That's an aspect of it. It's just an aspect of equanimity towards whatever's going on. It's not an attitude of acquiescence. It's not an attitude that says, I can't change whatever's happening. Because we can change. We can't change what's happening right this moment because it's happened. But we can do things to help it not happen again. But if in that moment we become enraged because it hasn't happened yet, then we're putting our peace in the hands of something outside of ourselves.
So how do you find the balance as far as, as an individual, you're saying desire, can create these aspects, but you don't want to not have any type of desire because then where's the motivation?
What's the point?
So then, how do you find the balance of?
You look at what's motivating you. If it's all about you, the Buddhist teachings say that doesn't lead to happiness. Self-centered focus does not get us there.
So it's wrong to want something for yourself?
Wrong's probably too stark of a word. The difference is, there's nothing wrong with enjoying. The difference is the seeking. That when we're caught up with seeking something for ourselves, what does that do? It distracts ourselves from spiritual concerns and entrenched in attachment. We get caught up in our desire for that, for us, and we miss others. Have you ever, I don't know, it probably doesn't exist anymore, and this could be a good thing because of things like Amazon.com. But, it used to be that when you went Christmas shopping or something, you had to fight the crowds because you had to go to stores. And then if you were like me, you were always looking for the sale items, and then you had, so there weren't a whole lot of any one thing, right? So you see that thing that, that would be perfect, and somebody else's hand gets on it. And then you really hope there's some way to manipulate this situation so they drop it and it's yours. You know, this is what we do all the time. You know, we actually kind of come from that angle a lot, and we want to be aware of it. We want to start to notice our self-interest that's already present when we desire, so that we can then choose whether we want to feed that desire or not. So if your desire is to make the world a better place, you know, you can look at that and go, oh, well, this isn't about me. So, you know, there's probably nothing wrong with this desire. You just keep looking. Because then as soon as you realize, yeah, I said it wasn't about me, but now that something's not going my way, I can see how I'm in it because I'm frustrated now. See, our negative states of mind, like frustration and irritation and wanting things to just, you know, go away or whatever, are clues that we think our happiness or suffering depends on getting what we want and not getting what we don't want. And those are not reliable strategies for happiness and for avoiding suffering. And this is where acceptance comes in. You know, being able to, you know, oh, that's not going to happen. And know that your happiness or suffering doesn't depend on that. Where we just accept. It doesn't mean we may not want to act in a way that will have a different thing arise, possibly, because we don't really have control over how things work out, do we? Can you make the world cooperate? So, hooking your happiness on that. There's a part of you that already knows it doesn't work like that. Because we can't control the world. It doesn't cooperate. Why would that be? Why won't the world cooperate?
Because we're all the same.
In what way are we all the same?
In self-cherishing.
What does that mean?
That means that we're all in it for ourselves.
We're all So you have, right now, we have a room of I don't know how many people, you know, and every single one of us is looking at things from the perspective of what's in it for me. It's just, and so that coming together is a, you know, a real recipe for, you know, manipulation or whatever, if we think that that's what really where our happiness lies. Yeah.
I was just going to suggest that for me, having the awareness of my self-centeredness and my craving, my desire, has made me acutely aware of how that might actually harm others.
That's the key, is to start to recognize that our rationalizations are often ways of covering up the potential consequences to others. It's like, I try to come up with really stupid examples because I don't want to pick on anyone, you know. So, like, I know for me, I have to watch how high or low I turn the air conditioner in the summer. You know, it's sort of like, oh, I know I can pay up to this amount of money on the bill. You know, so, well, so what? Well, so what? Have anybody noticed the planet lately? Those kinds of decisions matter. You know? So, I mean, they don't matter in the, you know, it's not enough. Other things also have to change. But if I just think about, oh, well, I can pay that bill, so I can indulge myself in whatever temperature I want, it's a lie. I'm lying to myself. Because if I want, you know, the planet to continue to be able to be a home for others, you know, just like me, it matters what I do with the thermostat. And do I resent that? Yes. Why? Because I'm self-cherishing. You know? I want to be comfortable. And if I'm comfortable What's that say about your great-grandchildren?
They don't know.
They may not have it at all. So it's really selfish. So this is the kind of way we have to keep looking. Where is, what is the consequence of this? Is there harm? And then we have to look at our own, what we value, and say, does that matter to me? And if it doesn't matter to you, then you might even ask, is that okay that it doesn't matter to me? Because, we might want to grow a little. So, but this is why we want to look for, how can I act in a way that benefits more than just me? And the good news is, it's a win-win. Because we will necessarily benefit from it in the long run if we have that attitude of taking care of others. I hope that's not this thing breaking. I think it's behind me in a different room. I mean, then we'll all see my pride right in action, Oh, golly. So.
I heard a saying
Yep.
about sometimes the having is not as pleasurable as the wanting.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? We are addicted to desire. We like anticipation. We cultivate it. Think about all the movie trailers that come out a year before the movie. The advertisers know what they're doing. So it's this, and, the insanity of it all is just stunning. And yet we feed it constantly. So really being able to, it's not about, we should never look forward. It's if we look forward, the idea that absolutely I will enjoy this. Because what's wrong with that? When's the last time you've been certain that it worked out? How often does that happen?
Right, the expectation.
Well, yeah, it's pointless. And the expectation can harm us in what way?
It's not realistic.
Well, it's not realistic. So if it doesn't go that way, what happens?
Well, you judge should create separation, right?
Yes, and you make you can go so many places with it, can't
Yep.
you? It's like you can start blaming the people, why it didn't go the way you thought it should go. Oh, well, it's your fault. But we also create disappointment. And disappointment is a suffering state of mind. So the more we can just be open to whatever happens, doesn't mean we don't plan, doesn't mean we don't arrange things that we want to go do. It just means that we don't hang our happiness or peacefulness or, a hook there, because that might not happen. But we can still be content if we don't keep hanging the hook somewhere else and just take responsibility for it. Because it's an inner state. We can let things make us miserable, or we cannot let them. This is a practice. If we're in the habit for those, oh, I really hope it turns out like this, we might want to look at that, because we may be adding a condition that creates more suffering for ourselves. That's not necessary. And the easiest example of that is when you're planning your weekend or your vacations. There's this whole, like you have this idea in your mind, and it's like, whoa, I can't wait till the day off and da-da-da-da. And then the day off comes and the car has a flat tire and the kids need something. There's such a pain. They're needy. And then, or your parents need something. This sandwich generation's just so great. But, it's just this recognition that we need to develop that inner calm, that inner joy of still breathing, you know, and still able to affect our minds, so that that is where we rest our hook. You know, so that whatever's coming up doesn't change that. It's kind of like you roll with it. It doesn't mean acquiescence. It doesn't mean that you let, you know, wrongs just continue if you can, you know, do something for that to change. It just means you don't have to take it personally or feel like it's going to ruin your life. You know? It's just an event. And the world's full of unskillful events. Why? Because we're all the same. And we're acting out of our self-interest, our self-cherishing, and we're wrong about thinking that that's what's going to make us happy. You know? So this desire to control people, control things, all that stuff is all about that wanting to get, you know, to feed your self-interest. And so the world's a mess because it's being run by us. And we're not particularly reliable. And we come from a self-cherishing place. And so that's, you know, if we really want the world to be a better place, we need to work on that. And through that, we can help others. You know, you model that to children, you know, they'll learn that. You know, this is what we can do to help each other. But also, it helps clean up our actions so that we're not doing things out of that place that's self-serving.
Your actions and thoughts need to align with that goal.
And your thoughts drive your actions. So the more attention, you know, we pay an awful lot of attention to our bodies and the health of our bodies and what food we should be eating and how much exercise we should be getting, you know, how much sleep we need, all of these kind of body things, you know, and oh, I need a day at the spa, you know, because, you know, I'm going crazy. But that's really about the body. We need to spend more time on our minds. The mind is a big part of the deal. So it's because, let's face it, at some point, you're going to die. Your body's going to fail you. No matter what you do, no matter how well you've taken care of it, no matter how much money you've spent on it, you know? So having a mind that can handle that is going to be important. You know? So you don't have those miserable last few years of your life where you hate everybody, hate everything, and are scared to death. You know? So, and that comes from developing this ability to be peaceful no matter what's going on. And that's a process. You know? So we can look at ourselves and look at our states of mind and go, am I feeding something that is not going to turn out well? Am I encouraging myself to continue to think in a way that is not an effective strategy to have a peaceful, contented mind? That does not mean you just don't care about anybody. Doesn't mean that you, non-attachment is not detachment. Non-attachment enables us to love without all the conditions and expectations and all the things that come from our side, you know. It's the old, you know, I'm happy as long as you're happy with me. You know? So, is that clarifying?
Oh, definitely.
I'm making up words. Oh, but so I just will repeat because I think it's important. Acceptance is not acquiescence. It's not saying, oh, I can't do anything about anything, so I might as, it's not that state of mind. It's about understanding what we have control over and what we do not. One thing we have control over is training our mind. So we can either continue training it in its unskillful habits, or we can start to try to retrain it in new directions that might be more skillful. We don't have much control at all over what happens outside of us, because other people are involved, and so is physics and all sorts of things, and our, so we don't go there. So what His Holiness says, the good kind of acceptance acknowledges and accepts our own and others' faults and failures, and at the same time wants to improve in the future. There is no use in fighting the reality of the present moment, but we know we can change and improve in the future. Future suffering can still be prevented, so our mind can remain optimistic. Because according to Buddhism, of course, our actions of body, speech, and mind are the causes for our happiness or suffering in the future. So the more we work with our mind, the more the future can unfold in a positive way. That we are part of cause and effect. It's not just gravity and all those things, science-y things, all the material world kinds of things that are involved in cause and effect. Our consciousness is also part of cause and effect. So our happiness and suffering, which is an entirely inner mental state, is responsible for our future happiness and suffering. It's this, so if we come from a place that isn't self-centered, that recognizes our interdependence, our interconnectedness, that recognizes the impermanence of things, that recognizes that this type of existence, a cyclic existence, is the nature of problems. Problems arise, the body fails, things break, all of that, that we don't want to pin our happiness, on that. That's not reliable. And so there are states of mind that are caught by that, are also unreliable. Our aversion, our attachment, our greed, our jealousy, our pride, all of those things are distorted states of mind. Whereas love and compassion and generosity and patience and wisdom are not incorrect states of mind. So we want to clean them up and remove the attachment that filters in, and the self-cherishing that filters in, and the aversion that filters in, so that we can come from a clean place and have a more impact on our peace of mind in a positive way. I moved something that was too big for me. Not accepting reality. Heck. So, yes.
I was having this exact discussion with a friend about 5 days ago. And we were talking, and I said, wow, I'm really happy that for years, decades, that I'm coming to the realization of being able, I didn't say I'm at that, but being able to accept things as they are. And I said, and I also found out this past winter that money and a place doesn't have any, or acceptance has nothing to do with my happiness or what of giving to others. So we've had these conversations, and she says, oh, does that mean you like Florida? No. And I went, what does that have to do with my life? Or, and then the second question, oh, so you're okay with your door falling off? And I said, and with close enough friends, I went, my New York it's just that it has nothing to do with what I found out with inner happiness. It's just I can't change what is.
Well, and this gets back to this idea of preference and enjoying and, you know, preferring, you know, whatever. There's nothing wrong with preference. We all want our doors to work, you know. It's that thinking our happiness depends on that is wrong. It's not true. We can be happy with our door not working. You know, it's not the door part, because it's not the door. You know, so this is the same thing with preference. You know, there's nothing wrong with enjoying our preferences. It's when we get hooked by our preferences and thinking that our happiness or unhappiness is dependent on getting what we want, because that's not true. So, like, if suddenly you get this wonderful meal and you're eating it, please enjoy it, you know. And when you get that really not so great meal, please be happy you have food. You know, it's just not about, you know, not enjoying anything. That's not the goal. Yes, Todd.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, I think I understand her experience of disconnect with other people.
Yeah.
Because, and which is why I don't often, unless it comes up, talk about, you know, my coming here or anything, because, I mean, my own husband, you know, I think that this is the culture that is so centered on self-assertion and agency, and that a lot of people just look at these teachings and think that I've given up on life, you know, and it's a very difficult thing to.
And you may not be able to explain it to others.
Yeah.
And I think that this is this is why community is so helpful. You know, like, you may feel like, oh, I've heard these teachings 1 billion times before, I don't need to show up. Well, you may need to show up for someone else, not for you. You know, that community, because we really don't have a lot of people we can talk about the world from this perspective without getting, you know, into a sort of, we don't want to turn people away from the Dharma. You know, we don't want to set up the scenario that they would never in 1 billion years walk into a Dharma center because, you know, look at so-and-so and how she talks. So, you know, they say things like, you know, abandon all desire. Who wants that? So, yeah, I mean, we really are isolated sometimes if we don't happen to be able to talk about things. And we really don't have to explain ourselves to others. That is not an effective method for helping others find their own way. It's too unsolicited, for one thing. People aren't asking, if people don't say, gee, I've noticed that you seem a lot more peaceful lately, what are you doing? Then you might not need to explain. But if they do ask, that's an opportunity to, you know, to share and you know, but keep it simple. You know? So but developing a community around Dharma centers is really helpful. You know, having that cup of tea with someone who doesn't think you're out of your mind is helpful. So but also it's helpful. This is where we want to really go within and start having confidence in our inner wisdom. You know, because there are times, I mean, I'm a nun. And I go out in the world and go, you know, what am I doing? No, I never believe that, but that's a lie. But I do, I mean, you know, there are times where I'll kind of go, is this just nuts? You know, is there really a way to end suffering? You know, I don't have any proof there's a way to end suffering. I do have proof there's a way to kind of help myself not suffer so much. I do have proof of that by my working on my attitude. You know, but enlightenment, you know, Pure Land, you know, all of this stuff. I have no proof of that. But I will say that if there's a way to end suffering, not just for myself, but for others, I want to be on that path. I don't have any doubt about that. And if I look at the way the world is headed, I don't think it's sane. I don't think the world's fine. I think the world's a mess. So why would I want to follow the social norms. It's a mess. It's not working out well. So, you know, that helps me go back to my, you know, my inner wisdom and go, you know, let that go. You know, don't compare your mind to other people's minds. Don't compare your, you know, because that's not an effective, first of all, I can't read their minds, so I don't really know what they're thinking, you know, so, you know, but I do believe in working on the mind, and that and letting go of the self-centered focus, because I know how poorly that worked for me, you know. I don't have any doubts that coming from that self-centered place doesn't work. So it's, you know, but it's, you know, so we have to encourage ourselves when we're surrounded by people who think we're, you know, going off the deep end. But basically not share that. Yes, Joy?
Well, what I want to say is, I find it really hard to control my mind. I mean, I know all the things you've been saying, and I know, and I can even say it to other people.
Or how about say it to yourself?
But I'm trying.
Yep.
But it's like really hard.
Yeah. No, it is. It's because you have eons of habits.
Yeah, and maybe because the habits are longer too. They've been here so long.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a tsunami of mental habit. You know, so being able to overcome this takes effort. And then you have to develop your new habit to the point where it overcomes that tsunami. It takes a lot of effort. You just have to keep saying there's a positive payoff for this. You know, you see your life improve in little ways. You see your attitude change in little ways. You know, and that encourages you to keep trying. You know, not looking for perfection. Oh, I should be able to get this within, I don't know, 67 days. Wrong. Wrong. The Buddhist teachings are correct. You've had eons to get where you are. So, you know, redirecting yourself takes effort. The good news is we have some help. We have teachings. We have information, you know, that can help lead us in a good direction. So we're not just all on our own. You know, that's part of our good conditions, that we live in a time when there are true teachings available, you know. So, and we at least live in a time that the culture, you know, at least you can talk about mindfulness with people knowing what you're talking about, you know. So, you know, things change. But it's, you know, the founders of this, you know, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you know, they brought Buddhism to the West because of the hippies that showed up in India, you know, and thank goodness. But of course, those times don't exist now. You know, most of the people I know who were part of that, you know, had to go out and find regular jobs, you know, came home and, you know, raise their families and all that stuff. It is hard to maintain new states of, you know, new habits without effort. You have to keep working at it until you have to rejoice in all the little, you know, it's like Yanzi Rinpoche said when he was here. He said, you know, recognizing that we live in an environment and a culture that doesn't support this at all. So even just the slightest turning of the mind towards virtue is huge. And that virtue is just recognizing, you know, that my self-centered attitude is not the method. So just kind of getting that is huge, you know, and it will eventually snowball. Just like our current habits are so strong, our new habits can become that strong. We just have to be patient with ourselves and patient with others. So, yeah.
What's brilliant for me is in purification practice, we're asked to change our behavior even if it's just for 1 second.
For 1 second.
For 1
that's
second.
right.
Which indicates to me that really it's about the willingness, you know, and
Yeah.
as long as we have that mindset and intention of willingness, we're on the right path.
Well, it's like, don't we hear a lot lately about political will? Do we have the political will for the country to change this or that? Maybe we don't hear about that. But anyway, that's what we need with ourselves. We need that personal will that cares about ourselves enough to want to keep trying. You know, that values our own minds, recognizing that we're interconnected, we're interdependent. Taking care of our minds matters to the whole going to use an inappropriate phrase, the whole planet, to all sentient beings, you know, that it's not, you know, we are all in it together. And so taking care of our peace matters. And valuing our own peace of mind matters. We do not have to be angry, suffering beings just because the world's a mess. That doesn't help the world. You know, we can be confident, contented, optimistic people who are putting out positive energy, you know, knowing that, you know, this is temporary, this whole world. You know, things change, things dramatically change, both for the better and for the worse. I mean, it's that, you know, that we don't need to hold on to how it is right now. It's going to change. And if we know that there's a method to changing, not others, but changing ourselves, and through that, we can help others when they're ready, want to also develop more skillful habits. So it's kind of like that. Yeah, Judy.
Sometimes I hear that a lot of what we think, you know, this is a mental attitude, and that's the important thing to change,
Mhm.
the mental attitude. And I always found myself thinking that I'm coming up short, like I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm all these not enoughs. And so I want to know, like, how, I don't know what I want to know exactly, but how to absorb this really mental attitude in a way that would be helpful in my life.
Well, I mean,
With generosity, with patience, with all of it.
I think for me personally, what I had to do was start understanding that holding on to this attitude about myself, about whether, you know, I can't do it, da-da-da, was giving myself permission not to try. So that instead of just, you know, encouraging that attitude, I had to just, and because of who I am, you know, I had to just forcefully say, I'm not listening. You know, that's not helpful, and it's kept you stuck, and it just, you know, and yes, you can keep being a jerk if you want to be, you know, but, you know, if you want to not be, you're going to have to make an effort. You know, it's this, I think understanding impermanence is really important, that just like everything is impermanent, so are our habits of mind. The mind is impermanent also. All you have to do is try to look at it for 5 minutes and try to find a theme, you know. It's just constantly changing. So we want to, you know, so with effort, we can affect the changes, the directions of the changes, you know, and quit listening to the garbage. We tell ourselves so much garbage. So that when it arises, we may not be able to stop the garbage right away, or even after 20 years, but we can quit listening to it. Oh, there I go again, thinking that, you know, if I get what I want, I'm going to be happy, you know. Well, that's not true. I mean, I have these conversations in my head, you know, because sometimes that's what it takes, you know, it's just because that urge comes over, you know, that little bit of craving, and if I don't address it, it just follows its habit, you know. But if I recognize it and then kind of go, well, yeah, I'm not listening, that can help. It can interrupt it. And the more I do it, the less power it has. You know? So it's just a process. Now, as you develop confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, then you have some extra tools, like, you know, he talks about Buddha nature, that we all have the capacity to become Buddhas. None of us lack what is needed to become a Buddha. So you're good enough. You know, there's just no doubt about it. You're good enough. So it's just, you know, but that takes a while to cultivate the confidence in. And it's not like this. Oh, so, you know, it's, you know. But I do think the way we talk to ourselves is critical. And so that, you know, when we hear ourselves say, I'm going to just not feed you. and see what happens.
Generally, if that happened in the sport, I said, there I go again, but now I can't remember what it was about.
Yeah, because, the mind is impermanent. Just like, I can't finish sentences, so we want to really understand the consequence of that. That means we really have tremendous potential of changing the way we think. So but we have to practice it. It doesn't just happen. Yeah.
Well, I don't like the idea when I'm hurting myself, because I'm making myself feel bad when I'm trying to change.
Yeah.
And I'm fighting with myself, but I know the way.
And then we can do things like, would you say that to your best friend? Really, and really keep interrupting those thoughts, of just, I'm not listening. It's like when, somebody that keeps coming up and saying something negative, and you just kind of go, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not, we have to tell ourselves that when we're feeding the flames. So we just can stop it. But you think about how you thought when you were a teenager. Do you still think that way now? No. You can change. You can use your experience, your life experiences and things, and change. And then you can go, what if I stop believing this way? What's possible? Let's find out. We have to, it just keeps coming up, but you just have to keep going. I found out that if I didn't hold on to the idea that I was not capable, then I really was capable of more. It's just obvious in a way, it's an obstacle to think you can't. So, it didn't mean I didn't need help. Didn't mean I didn't have to come, I had to look and go, oh my goodness, do I really say that? And then I have to go, oh, and where's the self-cherishing in that? Well, one of it is, I don't have to change if I just decide, oh, I am that way, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to put up with me, because I'm like that. Which I thought would be a great strategy for a spouse, but it doesn't work at all. Not at all, zero is the vote. And it's not fair. Especially when you have the other half. I'm sorry, you have to change to accommodate my needs. But, I'm sorry, I can't change to accommodate yours. I've got the bigger wounds. It's just not true. So you have to look and see, But mostly you have to tell, I'm not listening. And then you can change. Because you have that, you no longer have the excuse that I will change, I can't change. So, we do record this, don't we? Oh, yeah, okay. So, all right, let's take a moment and introduce, I kept talking about community, so at least, learn somebody else's name, so that, you can't claim that everybody here is a stranger. Would you give me Lou? Would you give me you just give me like an entry
Hi, how are you? I don't think I met you in town. Oh my. How you doing? John. Hi, Calvin.
Kevin. Yelena? Omar, nice to meet you.
It's a little more than nature. I couldn't tell you much of it.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Well, you can't see
Steve Ferris. I have a question. What was that quote that you shared with us?
Sometimes the having is not as pleasurable as the wanting.
Thank
But most
you.
importantly, the author who said that was Mr. Spock.
Really?
The Mr. Spock.
I heard that.
As in Dr. Spock or Spock?
This is not the time to forget all those names you just. And on this time that I remembered to do these things, you know, it is okay to make lunch plans or something, or make plans for a cup of tea. Because I really do encourage community. I mean, I have, there are 3 nuns in North Carolina from the center I originated from, and we talk on conference call. We study together 3 times a week, and we just have a chat session once a week. Because we depend on community, or we start thinking, that what's the point? Here I am out all by myself. I don't want that feeling, and it's really helpful to have other people, and so for me, that means having people with vows and who have the same kind of teachings I've received, so that really helps. So anyway, but my happiness does not depend on it. However, the Buddha encouraged us to have companions, on the path. It's not like we have to, even though they're prayers that say by myself alone, it doesn't mean that, that's just to develop the aspiration that if we are the only one that's able to help, that we will help. But it's not the idea that there's, that there can't be, you can't be helped. So, anyway. I'm just so glad you brought that up about desire, because I think it's so important for us to be able to distinguish between desires that will lead us to happiness and desires that just feed our habit of placing the responsibility for our states of mind onto something outside of us, and that doesn't work. So, and it's interesting, just the idea, it takes a lot of reflection to just even really let it sink in. What does it mean that we come from this self-centered focus? That, because it's more than just our, the one that we all recognize. Oh, I just want to do what I want to do. Do we really have to go see a chick flick? Do we have, whatever. I mean, so we really want to be aware of the deeper ways in which our self-centered focus affects us. How we really, our rationalizations almost are entirely based on it. Of how we can justify ourselves for being, coming from a self-focused or self-interested place. It's not that we can't, there's nothing that says, I want to become enlightened and stay miserable so I can be of benefit for others. That's not the goal. It's a total win-win. They talk in terms that we accomplish our own welfare so that we can help accomplish the welfare of others. So it's that you have to put the oxygen thing to your face first before you put it to someone else's. So we are the main beneficiaries of changing our attitude now. And it's just eventually by figuring out a path to how to actually take charge of our happiness, take charge of reducing our suffering, that this is an inner process, and then we'll be able to demonstrate to others how to do it, and because we become so other focused, we really will be so in tune to how we might be able to benefit. Because when you think about how, when we notice, oh, I don't like this, we're really pretty good if we start putting names to it, to what the different sensations of the body that clues us in to whether we're nervous or want something or craving and we may not see the parts of us ourselves we don't want to see, like, oh, I'm just being self-centered now. But we really are aware of ourselves, and so when we become more other focused, we'll become so much more aware of those around us, and our relationships have a much better chance of being harmonious and kind because we'll be aware of them. And especially if we remember they're just like us, that everybody's the walking wounded, everybody wants to be happy, everybody wants to reduce their suffering, and most of us don't have a clue about how to do it, so we're not skillful. So being patient and compassionate towards ourselves and each other, makes things better right away. So when we recognize that those minds that are kind of disappointed in others or, frustrated by not getting our way, or all the different little ways we think of our dissatisfaction manifesting all day long, if you start to be concerned about others and compassionate for ourselves and others, that reduces right away. You're just not so self-focused. So, and easy tricks to doing that are just things like, as soon as the whatever it is arises in you, you just remind yourself, oh, I'm not alone in this. I'm not, there are billions that are feeling just like I do right now, just kind of relax. Instead of getting hooked. Oh, I have to fix this now. Or it's a big, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. I act like I know what I'm doing. I'm just like you. So I do, though. I mean, I have the advantage of having practiced for a long time now. So, and I've seen the changes, and I see how much happier I am and how less hooked I can get, and or at least less often. I still get hooked. So anyway, but I have so much more self-respect because I just don't we have more self-respect when we treat ourselves respectful. When we can acknowledge, oh yeah, I may want that, but it's not good for me to have that. It's not good for me to act from that place. I don't want to be the person that acts from that place. So, anyway. Any questions, last thoughts, complaints? See somebody else if you have complaints. Okay, so we set a motivation at the beginning, or a positive intention to use our time well. So you want to think about that and, wow, okay, I did that. Whatever it is, oh, I didn't, fall asleep on the chair and start snoring, or I didn't stomp out, or, whatever. Or I tried to listen every few minutes or so, or once an hour. Whatever. So, I'm going to feel good about it. That this is a useful expenditure of our time. We're very busy. We have very full lives, and choosing to spend some time with other people who are trying to figure it out is a really positive effort. We shouldn't belittle the amount of positivity that creates in the world, spending time on your mind. It's so, and mind, heart, by the way, if I don't say it enough, are the same word. It's not a different word. We separate it into intellect and emotions. It's all the same in Buddhism. It's all mental. These are the mental events. We feel them physically, but they're mental events. And so, working on that, it drives all of our actions of speech and body. So it's so important. So we can feel really good, and we can feel good that we weren't here by ourselves, and that I'm not talking to myself. And although that's very helpful, I encourage the behavior. So, but
Thank you.
So we just can rejoice in that, and and in our efforts, each other's efforts, and then, according to the teachings, this places the positive potential for our own happiness in different ways, ripening in the future, and we just want to share that. So we really want to contribute to sort of like the great ocean of merit, that won't exhaust until everybody has totally free from suffering. And so we're to underscore that, we'll recite the dedication prayers by Dr. Deva on page 246. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, or the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drink. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, till then may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, so this week we have on Tuesday we're continuing with, it's more of our advanced class, but the Bodhisattva, Guided Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which is the same text that these dedication prayers come from. And then Thursday night we start, is this right? Yeah, we start the New Discovering Buddhism class on samsara and nirvana. So this is the process of how, according to the Buddhist teachings, how we get stuck in cyclic existence, and so what's needed to get out. So that will be for 5 weeks starting on Thursday night. Then on Saturday, if there's enough interest, so please, do we have a sign-up list? Please let this person know on your way out if you're interested, so we know. Next Saturday, yeah, this person is Nicole. Who's been out of town just so long, I've forgotten her name. So, anyway, but I'm doing a class, if there's interest, on Saturday afternoon from 1 to 5 on the mind in Buddhism. So that, so if you haven't really ever taken a class on what all the jargon is about the mind, how Buddhism understands the mind to operate, this might help, explain in states of mind, really making it clear the perspective of the mind from a Buddhist point of view. So that might be helpful. And then
and that's 1 to 5 p.m. and it's a suggested donation $25. And then we have just Sunday regular.
And then the usual. Meet back here for the usual on Sunday. So, and that's it. We need to announce this week. Okay. Yes,
We
Joy.
never do lunch anymore here, do we?
Well, you can, let's gather some people and go out to lunch.
Didn't we always do it
On
like
the first of the
Sunday?
month, and then, you know, some of us wanted to be able to go home on the, even on the first of the month, that would be me. In my self-cherishing mind, you know, so,
No, I thought we used to bring it in.
right.
It wasn't so much going to a restaurant.
No, it was just, yeah, bringing it in, yes, and again, as I said.
Next Sunday is the first Sunday of the month.
Yeah, no.
Would you like to do that? Can we do we have space for that?
Sure.
Let's do that. And that's, actually, it was really just bring your own lunch and sit down and chat, you know, so that it didn't have to be a big thing, because I don't cook, and I don't wanna have to cook for you. No self-cherishing here at all. Hey, is this still recording?
Yep.
Turn it off now. But yeah, we can do that, so we can do that next